This is the TicWatch S, and it has an impressive feature set at a very low cost, and let's find out if it's any good. What is going on, everyone? I'm Des with DesFit, and today we're going to take a detailed look at the fitness functionality of this watch, along with the SmartWatch features using both iOS and Android. And if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe for a lot of really in-depth fitness technology reviews. So the TicWatch S comes in two different flavors, the S model, which stands for Sport, and then the E model, which stands for Express. But both have nearly the exact same feature set, with the main difference being that the E model has the GPS inside the case itself, with the S model being aimed more at the fitness market, with the GPS being integrated inside the band. The entire watch is going to be made of plastic, which makes it svelte, only weighing in at 45.5 grams. And it's attractive for the price, but it's not a premium look nor a premium build because of all that plastic. This particular S model has a stealthy black case with some yellow accents in a color that they call Night, but there's also a not so subtle yellow, or aura color as they call it, as well as a white version which they call Glacier. It's going to be IP67 water resistant, so it's not designed to be submerged for long periods of time, so it's not recommended for swimming, but you could probably take a shower with it. Out of the box, the strap was very stiff, but did break in over the 4 weeks of testing that I performed. Unfortunately, even with the strap breaking in, it wasn't exactly what I'd call the most comfortable, with an overall stiff feel, and I kind of always knew it was on my wrist. When you bend your wrist, you definitely notice it, and it isn't the most flexible in wrist movements, and I think that's mainly due to the fact that the strap is fixed permanently in its orientation to the watch case, which makes it less able to conform to different wrist sizes and movements. Now, with that being said, I think the E model would be much better in this regard for quite a few reasons. First, it has a removable strap that has a rotation point, which can help with the wearability, and because it does not house the GPS inside the straps, you can replace those with aftermarket options. If something happens to the strap on the S model, you're probably going to be in for a more expensive replacement cost. The 1.4-inch touchscreen OLED display is gorgeous with its high pixel density with 400 by 400 pixels, and using the touchscreen is overall a pretty pleasant experience, but it is the strongest of fingerprint magnets. There's a couple odd things about the interface, such as swiping left or right from the watch face that brings up watch face customization. Viewing the display indoors is great, but once you get outside, you're not going to be able to see much. I found it nearly impossible to view outside in pretty much any lighting conditions, whether it was sunny, cloudy, and with or without sunglasses. It's going to have just one single button along with a touchscreen display for interfacing with the device. The button itself started out very stiff and broke in over the span of a couple weeks, but it doesn't provide a tactile feel and doesn't really have much feedback. And oftentimes I didn't really know if I was pressing it or not. It does have a microphone and onboard speaker, but it's a speaker on a very tiny device, so just keep that in mind. Battery life is pretty slim, with it lasting only about 24 hours at most, and that's going to be without the always-on watch face. Now, if you use GPS, expect to use about 15 to 20% of battery life for every hour of use. For instance, I had 92% of battery life before leaving for about a 2-hour bike ride, and it had about 57% a few hours later. If you were to use this in GPS mode until it ran out, I'd say you could probably get about 6 hours based on my testing. However, charging the device is very quick, using its magnetic charger only taking a little bit over an hour for a full charge of its 300 mAh battery from nearly empty. For the smartwatch experience on an iPhone, it's going to be very similar to any non-Apple Watch, and that means you'll get one-way notifications that you can view and dismiss on the watch, and that's going to be due to the restrictions in Apple's ecosystem. It does have very strong vibrations for those notifications, and you can even customize the pattern. It's not going to have cellular connectivity nor NFC for payments, but this already comes with a ton of stuff for the price, so I'd find it hard-pressed to actually complain about this. Obviously, since it runs Android Wear 2.0, there's going to be some big differences between pairing it to an Android phone versus an iPhone. And by the way, you cannot pair this to two different phones concurrently, and you can't just switch phones either. You're going to have to reset the device. On an Android phone, you'll get messages and calls, as well as a broader selection of third-party apps on the Google Play Store. For text messages, you'll be able to respond with a call, voice dictation of a text message. You can draw or use emojis, or you can use the very small on-screen keyboard. And then the same functions are going to be available for emails with the exception of calling. You can answer or decline calls from the device, and here's what you can expect from the speaker.
What up, girl?
You'll be able to control the music playback on your phone, and then the onboard music storage is going to be through downloaded tracks through Google Music if you have some playlists set up. And then pairing headphones was also a snap. And then what about Spotify, you may ask? Well, the Spotify app on the watch crashed the Spotify app on my Samsung phone every time I started it. So I would have loved to be able to find out if you could download a playlist on Spotify, but unfortunately, even with some research, I can't answer that question for you. So the smartwatch experience is pretty darn good, but just like a few other Android devices, it's going to be a little bit hit and miss in terms of reliability and compatibility with third-party apps. But now let's get into the meat of this review, and that's going to be the fitness functions. For daily tracking, it did a pretty decent job for steps, but did a lot more poorly for calorie calculations. It does provide idle alerts to remind you to be more active with a very strong vibration. And then for actually working out, it offers both its own stock fitness app along with Google Fit. The stock fitness app has a pretty limited number of stock profiles, so I'd like to see a lot more there. However, Google Fit has a huge list of profiles. I preferred the interface on the stock fitness app much more than the Google Fit for actually working out, with a little bit more robust display of data fields. I did find it nice that with both apps, you can view your workout history on the watch itself, unlike what is currently available on the Fitbit Ionic or the Apple Watch. And then GPS acquisition was very quick, even the first time I used it, and it only takes about 10 to 20 seconds at most to acquire, so good to go there. For walking and running, it did a pretty good job for GPS and came in close with most of the tests, but did stray a little bit off the map. Heart rate was a different story, and although it was close for the average and max heart rate, it had some issues. For walking and running, it does provide you with pace and step frequency, but I did find some spikes where the step frequency kind of went a little bit nuts. And then here's an example of an outdoor run where it came close for distance. It was within an okay range for average and max heart rate, but again, way off for the actual heart rate trends over the period. Cadence, or step frequency as they call it, was close overall, but as you can see, it had some serious spikes, thinking like I was a tap dancer in Riverdance with 346 steps per minute. Indoor running distance was quite a bit off, and you can see from the cadence and stride length that it's collecting not exactly the best data. And then again, heart rate was kind of erratic overall. Just like running, cycling was pretty hit and miss. For this first road ride, the first thing I'll point out is that the smartphone app obviously doesn't have long distances and long durations in mind, since it can't display a lot of data at one time. GPS distance was very good, with a very small variance compared to two other devices. Then let's take a look at that average heart rate, which was extremely low, but you'll see a crazy spike in heart rate for quite some time. Now, you can experience spikes with all wrist-based heart rate sensors, but I've never seen one freak out that bad before. And lastly, it somehow calculated I burned more calories, even with a much lower heart rate. For mountain biking, it was a little bit more off for GPS, but again, at one point in time, a huge spike in heart rate. And then you'll also see a much lower max speed and average speed, so that could be related to why the GPS distance was a little bit more off. So you would think that with indoor cycling, the heart rate would be much better with pretty much no variables, such as wrist flexion, wrist movement, or bouncing around on a mountain bike, but this was strangely the worst for me. It was way off for the average. It did track the max, but just look at that heart rate chart, especially at the end. So basically what I found is that it constantly stalled out at a low heart rate around 109 to 112 beats per minute, and then suddenly it would just jump back up. And this happened countless number of times, and we're going to see the same thing now with weight training. Weight training and high-intensity interval training are trouble areas for most wrist-based heart rate sensors, and the TicWatch was no different. There aren't any dedicated activity profiles for weight training or basically anything else other than running or cycling, so you'll use the freestyle activity for anything else. But as you can see from the heart rate graph, it didn't really know what was going on. It constantly stalled out at that low heart rate, just like indoor cycling. For rowing, just like weight training and high-intensity interval training, pretty much all wrist-based heart rate monitors aren't really good for this type of activity, and this was no different. But it was probably the worst that I've ever tested. Just take a look at that heart rate graph and try to come up with any sort of correlation. In terms of the TicWatch companion smartphone app, it's basic and really isn't all that bad, but it's kind of a ripoff of Apple's own workout app. But it does have HealthKit, Strava, and Runkeeper integration, so that's pretty awesome. So what's the verdict? Well, as a smartwatch, it's amazing for the price, especially if you own an Android phone, but just don't expect as much with an iPhone. But it really is quite the bargain, even with its lackluster heart rate performance. But for fitness, it's going to have some issues. Mainly the poor heart rate performance, but also some strange figures collected for speed, since it wasn't able to track those higher maximum speeds. But there's also going to be an issue of comfort and wearability, as well as the smartphone app, which is going to need some updates to make it a little bit more usable. So if you are looking for an inexpensive smartwatch, I would probably skip over the S model and go for the E model, which is going to be $40 to $50 cheaper, plus it's probably going to be a lot more comfortable. In regards to the big distinguishing feature of the S model, with the GPS being housed in the strap, pretty much every other GPS watch has the antenna inside the case. So although it's a neat idea, probably one of those things that really isn't needed and just adds some additional costs, as well as the lack of flexibility in terms of comfort and customization with aftermarket watch straps. I would love to compare the GPS performance of the S model versus the E model, but with the poor heart rate performance, I'll probably leave that to somebody else. But again, it is an amazing bargain for what you get. If all you need is a general idea of heart rate, you could probably get away with it, but just don't expect anything stellar and definitely don't trust those spikes in heart rate. And you're gonna have to charge often. Anyways, thanks so much for watching, and if you have any questions about the device that I may have left out, leave those in the comment section below, and while you're down there, hit that like button and also subscribe to the channel for a lot more videos like this coming soon.